What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for the latest episode of Broncos Now. As always, I'm your host, Sydney Jones. And coming up on today's episode, we went inside the locker room and spoke with the players for the final time this season. We'll hear from them as they reflected on the year. And Broncos lead writer Eric Delal will join the show to take a look at the team's mindset heading into the offseason. All that and more coming up. The Denver Broncos finished the season with an 8-9 record. Not the winning season they had hoped for, but their best record since 2016. Following the loss in Las Vegas to the Raiders on Sunday, head coach Sean Payton told the team to remember how they were feeling. And cornerback Pat Surtain, inside linebacker Alex Singleton, and tackle Mike McGlinchey all spoke on that feeling today.
Obviously, yesterday wasn't the outcome we wanted. Obviously, we wanted to finish off with that winning record, but I think the main thing is just understanding the guys we have in the locker room and how can we build off it.
You know, guys were pissed off yesterday. I know a lot of people, however you look at it, want to say those games don't matter or whatever, but, it did matter, and guys weren't happy to, go out there and play that way. And just have the, it kind of accumulates kind of just how you feel in the whole season. And so to, take that in, and, yeah, I think we're going to be able to build off it. I think, this is the first time in my last 4 years that I won't have a new head coach. So it's just nice not to have, all that change, new position coaches. So to just kind of be able to build something for the first time, and I know it's the first time in a long time, here it's able to build something and not kind of have question marks all over the place. So, to be able to do that as a group, the guys that are going to be here, we're already a close team. So to, keep those guys closer and whoever, comes in, because, with the turnover, people are going to come in and bring them in and grow the culture and get going again.
Hardships and struggle and the grind, makes it that much better when you do come out on top. I know my first year as a rookie, went 4-12, didn't have a season that anybody wanted to have, and then that following year, we went to the Super Bowl, and the feeling of that accomplishment and overcoming, all the BS that goes with losing, and getting to becoming a winning franchise, and expecting to win each week, and that feeling and that confidence that comes with that is truly one of the best feelings in the world, and I can't wait till we can accomplish that.
Alex Singleton, wide receiver Marvin Mims Jr., and Pat Surtain also spoke about the philosophy and culture that head coach Sean Payton instilled in the team this year.
I just seen a lot of confidence. Through the adversity, he always stayed calm. Always trusted us in the team. That's what I seen from him, and it showed. His proven ability to keep guys, at a high level, playing at a high level, it showed. And, next year's going to be even better.
Biggest thing I think is just really his culture, the way he wants things done his way, the way he – just talking to the guys from the past, they said it's been different. So just coming in and, it's my first year, so just kind of just going into the NFL life and getting adjusted to it. And the guys that have been here have gotten to get adjusted to it too.
I would say something that's grown so much in this locker room that I think continues to, and it surprises me every single day, is just how many guys get along outside of football. There's 20, 30 guys that go to dinner and hang out every single week, and you're not forced to it. It's like true friendships in this locker room, and I think that's what has kind of led us to where we are right now. And I think, like I said, it's just going to continue because we have that family atmosphere in this locker room and guys that want to win and sacrifice things to win, and so that's been the biggest thing this year.
Quarterback Jarrett Stidham also spoke to the media today inside the locker room and reflected on the past 2 weeks and evaluated his 2 starts.
I felt like I definitely grew, in those 2 weeks. It's one thing to practice certain things, but once you're out there playing and, making calls at the line and doing certain things and getting a feel for it, in live action, felt like I definitely grew. And looking forward to, the spring. Plus, Jarrett Stidham and Marvin Mims also went on to talk about how much it will mean to be in the same offensive system next year. Yeah, it's huge to, be in a system, now for a year. Like some of us were talking, whenever we come back in the spring, nothing's going to be new. It's all going to be stuff that we've heard before, stuff that we know how to do and why we're doing it. So, half the time that's the battle. So it's good to kind of have that under your belt for sure.
Yeah, I think it'll be huge, especially this offseason studying, just kind of knowing what the coaches want, what they look for, all that different stuff. And then when OTAs come, training camp comes, I mean, all the guys will pretty much be close to the same page because we've been through it for a year. So I think it will help tremendously.
And last but certainly not least, as the players leave for the offseason, Alex Singleton and Mike McGlinchey detailed their belief in this team moving forward and how they can build off of this season.
Like I said, I think a lot of it early with new coaches and everything is just kind of seeing what works, what doesn't work, what players you want here and there. And, so to, have everybody, coaches back and, a lot of the key guys back, day one of OTAs is going to be more smooth than we were week 5 during the season. So to, have at that point another 4 months before game 1 is going to be huge for us. And, I'm just excited to be able to start the season that way instead of, just, learning each other at that point.
Well, I think we took great strides, to be honest with you, of turning this thing around into believing that we can win games. And the great disappointment that you feel after a season like this and games like yesterday or New England or Detroit, when you're in the hunt, that disappointment doesn't come without the expectation of being great. And I think that expectation of winning ball games and and believing that we can do this is why it hurts so much. And I think the belief that this team has moving forward to accomplish what we set out to accomplish from starting in April is an exciting opportunity. I think we've grown a lot, we've improved a lot, but the biggest stride is you got to maintain that consistency all the way through. And offensively, certainly, we don't feel as though we did enough this year, and that's where we got to start moving forward in April.
Now joining me here in the Broncos podcast studio is Broncos lead writer Eric Delal. Eric, thanks for joining me. Season has officially come to an end.
It has had a disappointing result yesterday in Las Vegas, but still think some good things to move forward from the season with and head into 2024, hopefully finding some better results and capitalizing and building on the momentum that the Broncos found at times this season.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. And we went inside the locker room today and heard from several guys. We heard from them earlier in the show. It seems like everyone's pretty optimistic heading into the offseason here.
Yeah, I mean, the end of the season's always tough, right? Because the business of the NFL, the locker room's never going to be exactly the same as it was the previous year. Some guys are going to move on.
Right.
But I do think there's this sense among the guys that you've got to remember how it felt these last few weeks. And I think, too, remember how it felt when you won 5 in a row and the difference between those two stretches and what it takes to win football games and put yourself in position to get to the playoffs. And I think several guys talked about that fine line. We heard Sean Payton say that all year, the fine line between a groove and a rut. And I think guys are motivated for the 2024 season, the off season that's coming up. I think Jarrett Stidham said you've got to have that burning desire this off season and fuel yourself, motivate yourself, and come back ready to work. I did like what Sean Payton said post game, which is nobody said that this was going to be easy, and it is going to require some work, and there's going to be some stumbles, some difficulties, some roadblocks along the way. But as Mike McGlinchey said that makes it feel a whole lot sweeter if and when you do get to kind of that ultimate goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And Eric, as we look back at the season here, what progress do you really just feel like the team made this year?
Yeah, I do think it's a tougher, more mentally tough team, a team that found ways to win close games at times. I do think even though the Broncos ended with, I believe, 4 losses in their last 6 games here, there was still, I think, progress made from that Packers game forward and finishing the season 7-4, moving forward from that 1-5 start. It felt like a different group, a group that maybe grew up a little bit, learned something about itself, found some of its heart, as Mike McGlinchey said last week. And you're not going to win every close game. I think the Broncos were 5-4 in 1-score games this year. But if you can improve that a little bit, as Justin Simmons talked about on Sunday night, that can be the difference, right? If you're able to make that 6-3, is that enough to turn things in your favor? But I thought the Broncos, at times did what they were supposed to do and took care of business against certain teams and rode the momentum during the win streak and found some guys, some unheralded guys who can really play football. And, you got to start all over and do it again each season. It's its own identity and its own deal. Right. But it did feel, especially for a stretch there, like a different team, a more mature team than we've seen kind of the past several years.
Definitely. Yeah, Eric, you mentioned that kind of final stretch of the season here, the last third of the season. What do you think just changed for this team kind of after that 5-game win streak?
Well, I mean, part of it was the turnovers, right? I mean, game in Houston that really ended up being critical to the Broncos season. I mean, I know that the Broncos finished with 8 wins, and so it's a little silly to sit here and say, okay, well, what if they had 10 wins? But even if the Broncos had beaten the Patriots and Raiders, they would have still missed the postseason because of the way things played out with Buffalo winning the AFC East.
Good point.
Pittsburgh ending up with 10 wins. So the Broncos, unfortunately, would not have made it even if they finished 10-7 and won those last 3. Now, obviously, I think you feel a bit better if you're 10-7 and barely miss out. But that Houston game, obviously, the turnovers there were critical. In Detroit, that's a good Lions team that I think at the end of a 3-game road trip posed a tough task and was maybe just too big an ask at that point at the end of a 3-game road trip. New England, again, a tough game where turnovers made the difference. And then yesterday, Sid, I just think, early the Broncos had some chances. They weren't able to capitalize maybe. And then things just got a little bit out of hand. And Sean Payton mentioned up front and, defensively, just it wasn't quite where he expected it to be. But I think overall it's just about not beating yourself as you look at that stretch. And even if you just won the turnover battle in 2 of those against the Texans and Patriots, maybe you still lose that game in Detroit. That's a tough game. And maybe against the Raiders, you're still not, maybe the Raiders just on that day win up front. You're going to lose football games. I mean, it's the NFL. Right. You're not going to go undefeated. But if you are better in the turnover margin, maybe you win a couple of those other games. You're able to get wins there. So I think that was the biggest change. And then, you've got to be able to have more consistency, I think, offensively and defensively on both sides of the ball. Mike McGlinchey talked about how offensively he didn't feel like it was good enough. They've got to keep getting better. And then defensively, when they didn't have those turnovers, there was, maybe a little bit of just too many big plays. And so Broncos, I think this offseason have to get better in both those areas, which obviously, right, you got to just get better.
Yeah.
But when you didn't have those takeaways and the turnover margin to kind of help things, it created some difficulties, I think.
For sure. Yeah, Eric, another topic of conversation in the locker room this morning was, just Sean Payton's philosophy, his culture. And I know last offseason we talked a lot about that, how Sean was going to come in and change the culture here. What do you think he just really instilled in this team in the first year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about building a foundation and what's acceptable, what's the standard for this team. And I think, you heard that from the guys where, they were happy that they took a step forward and won 3 more games than they won in 2022, but it still wasn't enough. And it wasn't what they wanted or aspired to do this year. And Mike McGlinchey was asked about, you've got all this extra time off because you're used to going to the playoffs or the Super Bowl with San Francisco. And he was like, I don't want to get used to that. And so I think it takes that mentality that Sean Payton has definitely helped bring here himself. And then with the players he's brought in, you've got to have that, again, that burning desire to get better and demand excellence. And I think there's all sorts of small things in terms of accountability and the attention to detail and those sorts of things. But I think big picture, it's just about having those lofty goals and trying to meet them.
Yeah. Eric, last one for you here. As the players head out for the offseason, what's just the approach? What's the mentality here for the next few months, before they get back here for OTAs and the offseason program?
Yeah. Heal up, take some time and rest if you're these guys. We heard some guys talk about that, and then get back to work. I mean, I know that the off-season program that normally starts in April, but I think one of the things you learn this year is that every moment matters, every day matters. You've got to be ready to go, and so, if you want to have 24 be the year where you turn things around and get back to the postseason, the work's got to start. And so I'm sure these guys away from the facility, the ones who are back, will be working hard to get ready for the off-season program. Yeah. I think there's some excitement just in terms about the familiarity that they'll have with the systems when they come back. But, from a standpoint of being ready to go, you got to put the work in. And, again, I think it goes back to Sean Payton saying it's going to take hard work. No one said this was going to be easy. And, the 2024 season starts now.
Starts now. Yep. Well, Eric, appreciate you joining the show today.
You got it, Sid.
Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Broncos Now. Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in. I'll meet you right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube tomorrow for another episode. I will see you all then.